Russian trolls continue their efforts to destabilize the situation in Europe. Sometimes their actions take slightly comical turn, as the recent deepfake video featuring fake Tom Cruise.
And to discuss the Russian propaganda targeting the Paris Olympics, we're joined by Artur Koldomasov, a Disinformation Analyst, Detector Media non-resident fellow, the Institute of Global Governance. Good evening.
Good evening, thanks for having me.
And let me start by quoting fake Tom Cruise. The IOC members enjoy many special privileges, such as VIP services during the Olympics. Surely you are now thinking about what kind of privileges I enjoyed during filming. The craziest demand I've ever made is a 2-bedroom hotel suite for me and my Scientology spiritual guide, says fake Tom Cruise. Now, what is the purpose of such videos, to be honest? Do they make any difference? They sound so silly to me.
Well, it's a really interesting example that shows how Russian propaganda uses satire, sarcasm, and humor in general as a part of its disinformation campaign. For instance, we can definitely see that it seems very absurd at the first glance, and sometimes we wonder who falls for that. But actually, number one, there are people who are falling for that after all the precedents that we already had in many occasions earlier. However, the main purpose of that particular method used in disinformation campaigns is to actually muddle the informational space and the waters, as the IDM says, because apparently the main goal of Russian propaganda is to make you stop realizing what's real and what's not. And it's especially dangerous in such a dynamic and such an unstable world.
Mm-hmm. So what is the chain of distribution here? I mean, who is the main audience for such deep fakes? I mean, is it young people, older people? What is your take on that?
It can actually be targeted towards different age groups. We can also take into account other measures such as the job status of the people, not only their age, of course, and occupation, their location, their political views, sometimes even sexual orientation, gender, of course. But there are many factors taken into account. And one of the fingerprints of the Russian disinformation in general is that it is very localized in the target countries. Sometimes it seems that it's too global, but for instance, together with such campaigns, Russia launches at the same time the localized campaigns in local languages with reposting similar materials or even recycling the same materials. For instance, you could see similar videos in the Polish language Telegram channels that are led actually by Russians. And you can definitely see that by the misspellings, by the grammar mistakes, by the language phrases, and the whole character of language. Because, for example, you can find there some phrases not commonly used by fluent or native Polish speakers, but rather phrases copied and just poorly translated from Russian.
Mm-hmm. Now, to your point, I mean, is there a research perhaps that is actually showing, when you look at the whole world, the global spectrum of this, that which countries are actually falling for these more than others, or where are these deep fakes actually targeted at which countries?
Actually, the most vulnerable the most vulnerable region for such disinformation campaigns at that moment is definitely North America, because unfortunately, by the fact that they are very far away from all the events that are happening on our continent, they are not feeling exactly all the details, and Russian propaganda is trying to fill out the gaps with its own information to lead the narrative. And I think one of the tasks, not only for example, the Korean government or relevant stakeholders, but also from other European relevant stakeholders to try to inform the locals on these territories, specifically the United States and Canada, about all the intricacies of the Russian disinformation, because meanwhile, people in Europe, specifically in Eastern Europe, they became more resilient to the Russian disinformation because of its close location to Russia. It's
We're
a
questioning
curse definitely for
everything.
all of us.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a wise
but the
thing to
North
do.
Americans, yeah, but North Americans are definitely less resilient to that, and we definitely have the tools and have the knowledge to actually fill out those gaps.
Yes, but why, oh why, poor Tom Cruise with his Scientology spiritual guide? I mean, the studies actually show that, by presenting a celebrity in your deep fake message, it makes it less credible. So why to do that?
From one hand, yeah, it makes it less credible for some audiences. But for example, for those people who are not that intricate or not that informed in terms of their internet use or their relations with the content that they consume, of course, it can confuse them at first. But it's in that particular case, it's also not about that one particular piece. It's about its combination with other similar pieces, because the more the merrier for Russian propagandists in that case, and the more there are of the more there is of such pieces of content, the less resilience actually the content consumers have. And we definitely have to look at that in a very broad perspective.
Okay, now it makes a bit more sense.
Now, realistically speaking, are we able to prevent such deepfakes from emerging in media outlets, internet, and whatever else outlets we're using right now?
This is a very complex issue, and it's definitely included the legislative action, the technological capacity, the media literacy, and all other different components. It's really good that there are efforts already in the making about building the international agreement base regarding the AI use, that there is a discussion, the debate going on, but still there's a lot to work on. There's a huge room for improvement for that, and definitely such cases and such processes show that media literacy has never been more important, and this is a very high time to pay more attention to the cybersecurity measures, to media literacy in general, because as we can see, such informational weapons, let's call it like that, can hurt people and critical infrastructure even more harmfully than the real dimension ones.
Mm-hmm. So you say that the infamous, although hilarious, fake Tom Cruise video is only a part of a larger scheme. Now, the Russian smear campaign against the International Olympic Committee was first launched in 2023 on the Telegram channel. But how is it affecting the IOC? Is it anyhow effective at all?
You know, the image of the Olympic Games in recent years has been under the constant damage, not only because of the Russian disinformation, but also because of some different controversies along the way to organize the the Olympics, basically. And sometimes the Russian propaganda is using already existing controversies to fuel the fire, basically, and just to spread it all around. So it all comes down really to the resilience and to the will of the IOC itself, whether to respond to such controversies in a mindful way or just to ignore them and to host the event no matter what's going on. But of course, I think that this year's Olympics will definitely be unprecedented on many levels, specifically in terms of the image. There are already some scandals brewing, not only because of the Russian propaganda, as I mentioned before, but also because of some other processes on the geopolitical, on the media scene, in sports in general. So we really have to be patient and focused on what is going on around the Olympics this year.
Now, let's talk about the safety during the Olympics. Now, do you believe that Russia could try to instigate some riots there during the Games?
Well, everything's possible. Russia is actively using the propaganda and disinformation, for instance, to instigate the farmers' protests all across Europe since 2019. For instance, there's a lot of research dedicated to that that actually shows that Russia very intricately puts some messages in the informational space, specifically through the network of its own Telegram channels in the local languages of the countries where the protests are the biggest. And they are teaming up with the far-right political movements to fuel the protests even more and to turn them into the anti-Ukrainian protests, which was not their original intention. And of course, if there is a willingness to do that, Russia can definitely use that tool to instigate even bigger riots during the Olympics to weaken the international image of France as the host country. However, I think the French authorities, the French relevant stakeholders, they are already monitoring that kind of activity because the Olympics is the event of the unprecedented level with many delegations, many athletes, many spectators. And I think that, of course, it includes higher security measures.
Right, so let's hope it doesn't come to any riots, because definitely a moment of respite in these dark times we're living in is something we most definitely all need. Artur Koldomasov, Disinformation Analyst, Detector Media, non-resident fellow, Institute of Global Governance, was our guest tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.